Lillahi ta'ala, correct your intentions. Imam al-Iraqi said there are 9 types of ijazah. Last time we did talk about the 7th type, and I want to repeat that, and then we'll read whatever's easy after that. Insha'Allah ta'ala. I'm just going to translate directly, insha'Allah. And so the author says, and that's Imam as-Suyuti, rahimahullah, the 7th type of ijazah is permission for someone who's not qualified, an ijazah for someone who's ghayru ahl, unqualified. Unqualified for what? Unqualified to take from him. Meaning, he's unqualified to take from him at the time of getting the ijazah, not at the time he's narrating necessarily, but at the time he gets the ijazah. When he's getting the ijazah, at that time, he can't use it. Yani, he's not qualified. So is it valid? That's the question here that wants to be addressed. And that would be like a kafir, because we don't take our religion from a kafir. Could a kafir get an ijazah? Or a fasid, major sinner, or a majnoon, a crazy person, or a baby, yani a child who has not reached mental discerning. All of those, if they were to be given, yani if we assume that they could be given an ijazah, we didn't say now if it's valid or not yet. Yani we talked about it last week, but right now we didn't say if it's valid or not. We're just opening up the conversation. So the kafir, the major sinner, the insane person, and the baby, yani the child who does not have mental discerning, could it be that they could get an ijazah? Now, as for a child who does have mental discerning, this one, an ijazah for this one is valid. This one would be like an adult when it comes to getting an ijazah. Definitely. And yani, it's clear for you. We're going according to the saying that ijazah is valid. You already know they differed about that. But that difference in opinion, yani, those who support the opposition and they debunk or disregard ijazah, there's no one who takes that position anymore. So we're just now going according to the saying that ijazah is valid. So based on ijazah being valid, according to this saying, then the ijazah of a mumayyiz child is definitely valid. The ijazah of a mumayyiz child is like the ijazah of an adult. And the opinion of Judge Abu Tayyib al-Tabari and the majority is that this little child who does not have mental discerning can get an ijazah. It's valid. So if you had a baby, according to this, if you had a baby, then the scholar, for example, could say, yani, if your baby's name was Muhammad, I give little Muhammad an ijazah. So now at the time of getting this ijazah, he's not qualified to narrate anything, but the ijazah itself is valid. So that means that once he becomes qualified, he can just use his ijazah, because the ijazah is a permission. Yani, the ijazah is permission for a narrator to narrate if he wants to. If he wants to use it and then narrate whatever he has a license to narrate, then he may. And this is valid for someone who has a mind and someone who doesn't have a mind. Just that at the time when he doesn't have a mind, he's not qualified to narrate. Ibn Salah said, it's as if, yani, those who said this is valid, it's as if they see that the child is qualified to get the ijazah, but not at the moment to narrate, rather so that he could use it once he becomes qualified, because by getting the ijazah, he will have a confirmed now chain of narration. The ijazah solidifies his place in the chain if he were to narrate. And so even if he's not qualified to narrate at the time, he is, though, uh, it is valid. It's valid. So then when he becomes qualified, he can narrate. Yani, what I mean to say is it remains. The chain, the isnad remains for him. So once he becomes qualified, he can still narrate. And what about those who said that this child cannot narrate? It cannot get an ijazah. Those who said that this child cannot get an ijazah. For them, he can't get an ijazah because for them, his hearing is not valid. But is that the case? Is the child's hearing not valid? You know what we mean by his hearing is not valid. We're talking about hearing the knowledge. What's correct is that the child's hearing is valid if the child has mental discerning. Doesn't have to be pubescent for his hearing to be valid. But his transmission, though, that's a different issue. Rather, his hearing is the knowledge is going to be valid. His hearing the hadiths and hearing the knowledge is going to be valid. And then when that child becomes qualified, then he can narrate. So it's the same thing. Yani, those who said that he can't get an ijazah, they said because his hearing is not valid. But that's a weak position in the first place to say that the hearing of a child is not valid. Strong saying that it is valid. And there are Sahaba who heard while they were children, and then when they grew up, they conveyed what they heard in their childhood. So that's valid. That was accepted from them. And even if we were to say that a child's hearing is not valid, that doesn't mean that the ijazah has to be not valid, because yani, if someone wants to argue that the child's ijazah can't be valid because his hearing is not valid, then how would he answer the fact that you can give an ijazah to an absent adult, an adult who's not present? You can give an ijazah to an adult who's not present. You can say, I give ijazah to Fulan, and Fulan is absent from you. So it's valid, but since he's not present means he didn't hear. His hearing is not valid because he's not present to hear, yani, under normal circumstances. So the meaning here is that just because one's hearing is not valid still doesn't mean that his ijazah is not valid. So then, at the end of all of that, what does this mean? It means that what's correct is that an ijazah for a child is valid, even if the child is not mumayyiz at the time. And Imam al-Iraqi, he said, I didn't find any documentation about the ijazah of a kafir. وَلَمْ أَجِدْ فِي كَافِرٍ نَقْلًا, he says. I didn't find concerning a kafir any documentation about his ijazah being valid. He means like explicitly. I didn't find someone who explicitly said the ijazah of a kafir is valid. But he said, Bala, it is though. The ijazah of a kafir is valid. But if he conveys, it's not valid because he's a kafir. So what's the meaning of a kafir getting an ijazah? The meaning is when he becomes a Muslim, then he can narrate. He says that was done in the presence of al-Mizzi numerous times. And that's a proof for its permissibility. Because had it not been valid, then al-Mizzi wouldn't have been silent about it. He wouldn't have gone along with it. So when it was that he didn't object to it and he went along with it, then it means that he saw it as valid, because the scholars will not just be silent in the face of such a thing. If it were invalid to that scholar, he would have said, not this kafir here. And likewise, it is reported that there were people who are kuffar. They heard from the Messenger of Allah as kuffar. And then they embraced Islam, and then what did they do? They transmitted what they heard while they were kuffar. Yani, they transmitted what they acquired as kuffar after they had become Muslims, and that was accepted from them. So it is possible for a kafir to get an ijazah. Here, Imam As-Suyuti,
Sheikh
he
Ra'i,
didn't
Sheikh
elaborate
Ra'i,
here. So let me pull up Al-Iraqi's book here
Sheikh
to see.
Ra'i.
Yes.
Um, wasn't it that Tamim ibn Aus al-Dari, the one that reported about a Dajjal, wasn't he a kafir when he told the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam?
I don't know if he embraced Islam and then told the Prophet, or he told the Prophet and then embraced Islam.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I heard something about it, but I don't remember. That's why I wanted to ask you. Barakallahu fikum.
Ameen wa fikum. So here, let's see what did Imam al-Iraqi say about a kafir getting an ijazah. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, as for the ijazah for a kafir, I didn't find any documentation about it, but it has already been presented that it's valid if a kafir hears the knowledge. His hearing the knowledge is valid. He says, I didn't find from any of the early ones or the latter day ones that he gave an ijazah to a kafir, except that there is a person who's a doctor. There was a doctor from Damascus. I saw him in Damascus. He's called Muhammad ibn Abdi Sayyid ibn ad-Dayyan. He heard hadiths as a Jew. He heard from Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Abdul Mu'min as-Suri, and his name was documented amongst those who heard. His name was logged amongst the names of those who took. And Ibn Abdul Mu'min, the one he heard from, Ibn Abdul Mu'min, he gave an ijazah to everyone who heard from him. And so this Jew was one of them. And Al-Iraqi says, and his hearing and his ijazah were witnessed by Hafiz Abu al-Hajjaj Yusuf ibn Abdul Rahman al-Mizzi. He says, had it not been that al-Mizzi deemed this permissible, he wouldn't have agreed. Yani, he wouldn't have been silent about it because he was aware of that. Al-Iraqi says, then Allah guided Ibn Abdi Sayyid and he embraced Islam and he conveyed hadiths after that, the hadiths that he had learned as a Jew. He says, and our colleagues took from him, Al-Iraqi says. Our colleagues, our colleagues took from him what he narrated. And Al-Iraqi says, I also didn't find any documentation for a fetus. And the fetus, what's right is that he can get an ijazah because we already said that someone who doesn't even exist yet could get an ijazah, according to those who permitted that. Meaning, if someone were to say, for example, I give ijazah to Bilal and all the children that Bilal shall have in the future. So those children don't exist yet. So some deem that valid ijazah. So if it's valid to give ijazah to someone who doesn't even exist, then it should be valid to give an ijazah to a fetus. So whoever permitted an ijazah for the non-existent permitted an ijazah for a fetus. And whoever denied an ijazah for the non-existent denied the ijazah for the fetus. And Al-Khatib said, I didn't find any of the people of hadith who did that, though, who gave the ijazah to a fetus. But Al-Iraqi says, I saw some of the latter day ones doing that. Hafiz Abu Sa'id al-Ala'i, that's Al-Iraqi's sheikh. And the sheikh mentions him a lot. Our sheikh mentions Hafiz Abu Sa'id al-Ala'i. So you have Hafiz Abu Sa'id al-Ala'i. He's the sheikh of whom? Of Al-Iraqi. That's the one we're reading his talk now. Al-Iraqi is the sheikh of whom? Of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he's the sheikh of whom? As-Sakhawi. He was asked for a fetus. He was asked for an ijazah for a fetus. Subhanallah, the Muslims. May Allah have mercy on them. Can you imagine someone is asking Sheikh, he give ijazah, and his wife is there with belly. He give ijazah to the baby in the belly. He was asked for an ijazah with the parents too, for the parents to get an ijazah and the fetus too in the belly. And he gave the ijazah. So now I'm back to Iraqi's book here. So he says, I'm just going to back up a little bit, repeat a little bit of what I already said. As for ijazah for a fetus, I didn't find anyone, Al-Iraqi says, who documented its case, except that Al-Khatib said, we haven't seen anyone that they gave an ijazah to him and he wasn't born. We haven't seen them give an ijazah to someone who's not born. That's all he said. And he didn't say whether it's valid or not. He just said that he hasn't seen that. Al-Iraqi says, there's no doubt, though, that he's more deserving of being able to get an ijazah than someone who doesn't even exist at all, like we already said. And Al-Khatib, the one who said, we haven't seen that they gave ijazah to someone who wasn't born, this same Khatib, he validates an ijazah for someone who doesn't exist at all. So it should be then that he validates giving an ijazah to a fetus. Al-Iraqi says, I have seen some of our sheikhs asked, requested, it was requested of him an ijazah for a fetus after his parents were mentioned before him. His parents were mentioned, the ijazah was requested for the parents, and then after that, the fetus was also requested to get the ijazah. And also some others who were in the group. There was a group there. And so the sheikh who was asked, he gave an ijazah to all of them. And who was that? That was Hafiz Abu Sa'id al-Ala'i. And Al-Iraqi says also, I saw one of the people of Hadith avoiding giving an ijazah like that. And he avoided giving an ijazah to anyone who wasn't even actually named, even if they were present. And that sheikh, he wrote, I give an ijazah to all of those who were named. So that's how he avoided giving an ijazah, as opposed to like, he's not, when he says he avoided that, doesn't mean he said, no, you can't have the ijazah. It's like he just avoided it. He dodged it. And he wrote, I give ijazah to all of those who are named. And Al-Iraqi says, that's the muhaddith Abu Thana Mahmud ibn Khalaf al-Mambaji. Al-Iraqi says,
Sheikh,
yes?
my question is, when you said muhaddith, is that one person in particular?
Muhaddith means hadith scholar.
Okay. So could that mean that that was only one hadith scholar there, or all of them that were there? Just the last statement that you said, when you used the term muhaddith, you started the
Muhaddith
statement.
is a singular.
Okay.
A hadith scholar.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Al-Iraqi says, this one we just mentioned, this scholar, he avoided some things here. He avoided giving ijazah to anyone who wasn't named. But those who were general about the validity of the fetus getting an ijazah and others getting an ijazah, they are higher scholars than that one who was avoiding some things. And they are more knowledgeable and they have more memorization and they have more mastery. Scholars who are higher, more knowledgeable, and have more mastery, they permitted what this scholar was avoiding. But it could be that what he did was he just didn't look into the names of the people who were wanting an ijazah, and he didn't look into their faces so that he could know, was someone born or wasn't born. And all he did was give an ijazah to the people who are named. But it has already been established that ijazah is valid even without the sheikh who's giving the ijazah looking into the people who are getting it. He doesn't have to know their names. He doesn't have to look into their faces and see who they are. But the norm of the people of hadith is that they wouldn't give an ijazah without looking at the person who's asking for it. And the eighth type of ijazah, so we talked about the ijazah here, the seventh one, which is the ijazah of someone who's not qualified. We talked about the ijazah of a child and the ijazah of a kafir. And even we just talked about the ijazah of a fetus. But what about a fasiq, major sinner, and a mubtadi', a heretic altogether, but he's not a kafir? Then yes, if the kafir's ijazah is valid, then a major sinner's ijazah is going to be valid. And even a heretic's ijazah will be valid. So when that major sinner or that heretic repents from his major sin, then he can use the ijazah that he got and narrate. And the eighth type of ijazah, is getting permission to narrate what the licensing sheikh hasn't even acquired. The sheikh who's giving the ijazah hasn't even acquired the subject of the ijazah. Yani, to get an ijazah for what the sheikh will acquire later. So someone says, Sheikh, give me an ijazah for what you shall learn. He didn't hear it yet. He didn't take it yet so that he could narrate it. Al-Qadi, Judge Iyad, Al-Qadi Iyad, he said, I haven't seen any of the sheikhs talk about this. But I heard some of the latter day ones and some of the contemporaries doing it, that they would do that. But I read in the index of Abu Marwan, Abdul Malik ibn Ziyadatillah al-Tubunni, that he said, I was with the judge in Qurtuba, Abu Walid Yunus ibn Mughith. So Judge Yunus. When a man came to him and asked him for an ijazah, his request was to get an ijazah for everything that Judge Yunus narrates up until today and what he shall narrate later. So Judge Yunus didn't respond to him. So the one who was asking got angry. And then Judge Yunus looked at me. And then I said to that one, hey, you, he would give you something that he never took? That's impossible. And then Judge Yunus said, that's my answer. And Judge Iyad, Al-Qadi Iyad, he said, this is what's correct. Because this person is requesting, basically, his request amounts to asking to be told something that the one he's asking to tell him never heard. How could you tell someone about something you never heard? You can't. So Judge Iyad says, so this is correct about this case, that it's not valid to get an ijazah for something that the sheikh didn't even take yet. انبنى على الإذن في الوكالة فيما لم يملكه الآذن بعد. But Ibn Salah, he said, it depends on how you look at it. He said, if you look at the ijazah as a sort of telling, narrating, then yeah, it's not going to be valid. There's no way you can tell someone something that you never even heard or you have no transmission for. I can't tell you something that never reached me. So if you look at it that way, then yeah, it wouldn't be valid. He said, but if you look at the ijazah as a permission, not a telling, but as a permission, then it could be valid. Just like if you authorize someone, you know about authorizing. You say to a person, I authorize you to do for me such and such. I authorize you to sell my house for me, or I authorize you to do such and such for me. That's a permission. He's saying, isn't it permissible to authorize someone to do something for you, but you don't own it yet? So when you own it, he'll be authorized. So when you get the money, for example, he'll be already authorized to use that money that you didn't get yet. He said, so if you look at it that way, then it could be said to be valid. So according to this, yani, if we want to say it's not valid, then one needs to be keen. The one who is using an ijazah then needs to be keen that what he's narrating is what his sheikh narrates. Now, if the sheikh were to say, I give him an ijazah for anything authentic, or I give him an ijazah for anything that's authentic according to him, yani, I narrate, so from all of what I narrate, I give him an ijazah in whatever's authentic. Or I give him an ijazah in whatever he deems as authentic from what I narrate, then this is correct. This is a valid ijazah. And Ad-Daraqutni and others did that. Then a person who has such a permission could narrate whatever is authentic according to him after the ijazah. And then what about the ninth type of ijazah? The ninth type of ijazah is for someone who has an ijazah to give an ijazah. Yani, so it's he in the first place, what he's giving the ijazah, the subject of the ijazah that he's giving is an ijazah for him in the first place, for the sheikh. The sheikh who's giving such and such book, giving an ijazah in such and such book, he has an ijazah in that book himself. So is it valid to give a license for something that's licensed? That's the ninth type of ijazah. Ijazatul mujaz. Al-mujaz is the thing that's licensed. Like for the sheikh to say, I give you an ijazah and everything that I have an ijazah. Or the like. Al-Iraqi says, there was a scholar of hadith, one of the sheikhs of Ibn al-Jawzi, who said, this is not valid. And he wrote a whole book about it. And the point of who deems this not valid is to say, well, an ijazah is already weak. So it's going to be ever weaker when it compiles, when the ijazah compiles, it's an ijazah on top of an ijazah. But what did Ibn Salah himself say, rahimahullah? He said, what is correct and that which is practiced is that even this type of ijazah is what? Is valid. And this is not like an authorized person authorizing without permission. It's not the same. Meaning, what if you authorize someone to do something for you? Can he turn around and authorize someone to do that? He can't. It has to stop at him. The authorization you gave him has to stop at him. That's the Shafi'i school. Ibn Salah is saying, this is not the same. And Al-Khatib said that Ad-Daraqutni deems it valid, and others. And even Al-Hakim did it. So those are big names in hadith, if you know some hadith scholar names. Al-Hakim, the author of Al-Mustadrak. Ad-Daraqutni, yani, massive hadith scholar. A criticizer of Al-Bukhari, not criticizer in a bad way. Like one of the scholars who said, no, there's some weak hadiths in Bukhari. That's how powerful he was. And some scholars even said an ijazah for something that's, yani, an ijazah for an ijazah is strong and it's permissible. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We'll stop there. So those are 9 types of ijazah. We covered them all, mashallah. So what's left here before we get back to Nukhbatul Fikr? Al-Iraqi, he just has a small chapter here, Lafzul Ijazati wa Shartuha, how to word the ijazah and what conditions are there for the ijazah to be valid. So we'll see what he has for us, inshallah, next week, and then we'll get back to Nukhbatul Fikr. Do you have any question I can answer for you? Naam. Ad-Daraqutni, he's one of the criticizers of Al-Bukhari. Yes. Not in a bad way, though. Criticizer, not that he has anything against him, just that he's massive hadith scholar. Ad-Daraqutni, yeah, hakadha. That's his case. He was the one that it was said about him that he would walk through the marketplace with his ears plugged. So he was asked, why do you walk through the marketplace with your ears plugged? He said, because if I ever hear anything, I never forget it. MashaAllah.
Sheikh, I have a
Yes.
question. Please,
Yes.
you gave us information. You said, who was the Sheikh of Al-Iraqi?
The Sheikh of Al-Iraqi is Abu Sa'id Al-Ala'i.
Okay, and he was the Sheikh of Al-Iraqi.
Yes.
And Al-Iraqi was the Sheikh of
Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani. And Ibn Hajar is the Sheikh of As-Sakhawi.
This is a beautiful lesson.
Oh, that's great. Alhamdulillah. I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes when I review for the lessons, like some of lessons like this, for me, it's very interesting, but I'm not sure sometimes if it's interesting to the audience. So, mashallah.
I mean, that you would share what you're reviewing is a great rizq from Allah for the people who come and who are interested.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Barakallahu feekum.
And meanwhile, Beacon, did you put this up like you did your other lessons, this lesson?
What do you mean that I put it up?
You know how sometimes we can review our classes that we took?
Like on YouTube?
Yes.
I wasn't sure I was going to put this on YouTube.
Okay, no problem. You don't want to confuse people. They may not understand. But it's a blessing. It's powerful for those who have some understanding or some who may look at it and misunderstood. You know, they could get clarification.
Yes. I'll consider it. I'll listen back to the recording and consider putting it on YouTube, inshallah.
Inshallah. No better. No, what a nice way for us to spend our time.
Yes. MashaAllah. Yes, indeed. It is mercy from Allah, big mercy from Allah Ta'ala.
Yes.
Subhanallah. Yes. This goodness that we are in is a big mercy from Allah.
Yeah.
I was telling some other people I had a lesson with recently. I was on the train and I saw a lady on the train. This lady, Yani, looks like she's on drugs. She looks like other people who are on drugs. And you know how those drugs make them skinny and things like this. And she has swollen hands, swollen fingers, and she has a thing like on her foot. And very bad situation. She looks like she lives on the train. I don't know where she lives. And wallahi, yani, as a little child, I was taught that it's bad manners to stare at people. But yani, because I was so much getting a lesson from this lady. Because it looked like she has a miserable existence. That's why. I said to myself, subhanallah, Allah Ta'ala gave me a home. He gave me correct religion. He gave me correct knowledge. And so many blessings and mercies.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. If he willed, I could have miserable existence and be living on the train.
Yes, yes. Understood. It could be us. Yeah. Alhamdulillah, it could have been us.
Yes.
Yes.
MashaAllah. What did you say here? You said, did the Iraqi from the route of some of his colleagues in Hadith say they narrated from the route of non-believers? You're saying, did Al-Iraqi say that they narrated hadiths from the route of kuffar? If that's your question, he did not say that. No, he didn't say that. He said when he became a Muslim, he said Allah guided him to become a Muslim, and then he narrated, and then they took from him after he became a Muslim. Barakallahu fikum. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك